this presentation by moving to Article 1, which, let's see, do I see the slides? I do not. Do folks see the slides? I'm not seeing them.
I do not see them.
All right. So we're going to pause for a second to see where the slides come in.
There they are.
Slides. Thank you, Roy. And so, the first item on the list is the procedures. The purpose of this meeting as well is for us to comment on the comments and questions we received since our last discussion, our last meeting. We did not get a lot of questions about the procedures. I would say that they fell into two categories. One was concern that the procedures that we are using are not really suitable for some of our voters who either don't drive or don't have the ability to ride share to go to the full polling place. The other comment was the question about the timing of the mailing of notice that went out and it arrived in our mailboxes later this week. And that particular comment, and the gentleman who made that comment actually asked if I would be willing to postpone the actual voting and the procedures in order to send out more notice. I am going to say that there's been a lot of time and effort put into this process. We have done our best to accommodate everything we could anticipate, and all of this is new to everybody. I believe that we've done an adequate job, and I think that I'm going to decline to postpone anything at this point. But I'd also like to remind the voters that this is your meeting, and if you feel that my decisions regarding the procedures and whether to postpone it are wrong in any way, I would invite you to come and vote tomorrow. And if you're unable to get to the polls, call your neighbor, ask them to come vote. It is your meeting. It's your decision. And we're doing our best to accommodate the COVID-19 world we're all living in right now. And so basically the procedures tonight are going to be to walk through each one of the warrant articles to have the board discuss the questions, comments they've received since we left off. And so I'm going to ask Roy to move to the next slide and start with a discussion on Article 2, which is to see if the school district will raise and appropriate the sum of $30,350,341 as it's up on the slide and is posted in the warrant. And I will recognize Bryce for a motion.
I move the article as presented for discussion.
Second.
Okay, so thank you. And it's been moved and seconded. Let's, Bryce, if you don't mind, please speak to this motion.
Actually, I'm going to defer to Ms. Rain for her to lead the discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Moderator. As Mr. Moderator just stated, the school board's presenting the budget tonight as it was originally presented on Tuesday for the amount of $30,350,341. This will be the amount that we want to be kept on the ballot to vote upon. The original budget given to us by the superintendent back in December was cut by the board in the amount of $249,740. The budget was then handed over to the budget committee, and we did another cut of $313,372 at that point. There was a meeting last night with the budget committee, and they asked us to cut an additional $250,000 out of this budget by a vote of 3-5. This would save the taxpayer $69 on a $350,000 house. While the school board is very respectful of this cut and mindful of where many in the community are financially, we still feel that the budget that was originally presented on Tuesday is the best option for our students, our schools, and our town. This afternoon, the board had an open meeting with the administrators, and we took a hard look at our budget. As I stated at the Tuesday meeting, personnel drove most of this year's budget. We are asking for more SPED services and more guidance counselors, or one at the high school. Given that we have been on remote learning since March, we feel that these positions will be crucial if and when we're allowed to come back to school this fall. And we did not feel cutting any of those would be a prudent decision. We then took a hard look at other line items, and all the things that we could come up with to cut would really just be kicking the can down the road, looking to put them back into next year's budget or budgets after that, which we really didn't think was the best idea for us. So that's why we are still going to be looking to keep our budget as presented. And in just a moment, Mr. Larrabee will be presenting on Articles 3 and 4. And there's a great possibility of an amendment coming to those articles, which we think would make the taxpayers happy. This budget as presented, as I stated on Tuesday, already is coming in with a decrease in taxes needing to be raised for the taxpayer. So for that reason, as I stated, we're going to be keeping the budget the way originally presented on Tuesday. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. We have on the call and with the ability to speak to the voters, Mark Zerba, the chairman of the Budget Committee. So, Mark, I'd like to recognize you to speak on behalf of the Budget Committee. As long as
Are you able
push
to
your
hear me
own
now?
there
Okay.
you go.
All right, thank you, Jim. This is Mark Zerba. Good evening. I'm the chair of the Budget Committee, and I will be speaking tonight on behalf of the committee. So we went through our usual process of reviewing the proposed school budget in January and February, which culminated in a final vote following the public hearing on February 10th. As a result of our review and discussions with school administration and the school board, we were able to reach unanimous agreement with the school board as to the amount of the proposed budget, which you see before you in Article 2. Once the annual meeting was delayed and the school board saw the impact to the community from the pandemic, the school board decided to revisit Articles 3 and 4, which will be talked about shortly, dealing with the Bow Elementary School renovation. The Budget Committee met to discuss the potential changes to Articles 3 and 4, and then we also undertook a discussion of the budget. The committee members had differing opinions on how, if at all, the proposed budget should be changed. Some felt the proposed budget should be kept as we voted in February. The challenges that the school district faces next year will be as significant, if not more significant, than what we anticipated in February. Others felt that in light of the financial impact to members of the community, the school needed to do a little bit more than just revisit Articles 3 and 4. Ultimately, the committee voted 5-3 to recommend that the school board reduce the proposed budget by $250,000. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. At this point, I'd like to know if any of the other board members would like to comment on Article 2.
I just want to note that out of all the comments that we received either via email or on telephone, we did receive one from an individual who was questioning some of the numbers that we used for our budget. And our business administrator, Dwayne Ford, had a reply to that email and gave back some different figures. And we have not heard again from the individual who sent the first email. So we're assuming that that person is okay with how Dwayne explained things.
Am I on? This is Bryce Larrabee. I will comment. I'll try not to be too redundant to what Ms. Rain said, but really, you know, my understanding was last night the Budget Committee said, see if you can find $250,000 in savings. And so we really looked in two places, the 4 new hires that we have, and then really everywhere else. And the 4 hires, the 2 hires for special ed, as described to us, are ultimately going to save us money as a jurisdiction to have those positions, keeping from kids being outsourced, identifying issues. Those are actually going to benefit the school district ultimately in a financial sense. The counselor position is one that has been in great need for actually several reasons. One of which we have one of, if not the largest caseload per high school counselor in the state. And it's also the first point in which one can address really the security of the school. And what I mean by that is mental illness or any sort of mental issues. It really is the first line of defense for folks to do that. And having an additional counselor is a way to deal with that. And finally, the last hire is an elementary school teacher, and it's just merely an issue of class size. I mean, we need the teacher because the class is too big, and as I think most people know, particularly at the elementary school level, it's critical to have a small class size. So after that, we just didn't feel, and the administration said they didn't feel that they could not have those new hires. And so when we looked at the other issues, it really was just kicking the can down the road. I mean, what I mean by that is, for example, we have 2 bus leases that are up this year. We could not get those 2 bus leases, but that just means next year we're going to have 4 bus leases. I mean, it doesn't help in the long run. And in fact, I'm more concerned about next year really than this year. I'm really concerned about what March and 21 is going to look like. And so I'd rather spread out that as opposed to putting additional funds into next year towards the budget. So I'm really inclined to keep the budget as is.
Thank you. Any other board members?
This is Martin Oslo. I agree with Jennifer and Bryce. Considering that the budget as originally proposed by the superintendent has been already reduced by over $500,000, I do believe that sticking with this budget and not continuing to kick the can down the road is the right way to go. That would be my recommendation.
Eric here, I'll chime in too. I had a few things I wanted to say regarding supporting keeping the budget as it is, and Jennifer, you said them all already, so I'll keep this brief. The budget is lean. It was cut already, as you already said. We reviewed it, looking hard for other places we can make cuts, and there really aren't good cuts we can make without harming the school, and we want our students to thrive. So the budget should stay as it is, I think, and we can talk about making cuts elsewhere when we talk about the other warrants.
I'll just chime in too. This is Jenna Reardon. I agree with everything, and we do appreciate that the budget committee came back and asked us to cut $250,000, trying to be responsible, of what's going on in the community and the times. And we really did look at it, and our budget is extremely lean. We worked really hard earlier in the year to cut everywhere we found that we could possibly safely cut, so that we could ask for money in Article 3 and 4, which we are, again, because of the times, likely going to change. And so I think that we did the best we could, and for the best interest of the community and the school, there's just no more where we can safely cut. So I think we need to leave the budget the way it is.
Okay, thank you. So the motion before this meeting is to move our Article 1 to the written ballot, and that would be without amendment, from what I've heard from the school board. So if there's no further discussion, I think we'll do these by a roll call vote.
I'm sorry, excuse me. Are you talking about Article? You just said Article 1. I'm sorry. I'm just clarification. Article 1 or 2 are you speaking about right now? I apologize.
Yeah, so it's Article 2. Thank you. Yeah. So you're right. It's Article 2, the budget, and the question is whether to move it to the ballot without amendment. And so I will call the roll. Mr. Larrabee, are you in favor?
You're on mute, Bryce.
I said yes.
Okay. Ms. Strongrain?
Yes.
Mr. Osler?
Yes.
Dr. Schulman?
Yes.
Ms. Reardon?
Yes.
Okay. So that Article 2 will be moved to the written ballot. And I guess that brings us to Article 3. I think we need, let's see, there's Article. You're way ahead of me. I've got so many screens up here, I don't know which one I'm actually looking at times. So this is to Article 3 to see if the school district will raise and appropriate the sum of $150,000 for architectural fees, engineering fees, and other costs with the renovation of the Bow Elementary School. Do I have a motion?
I move the article presented for discussion.
Okay.
Seconded.
Thank you. And then, all right, so it doesn't say here who's going to speak to this one, so I'll let you pick up.
Bryce Larrabee will be speaking to this issue. So we're going to take Article 3 and Article 4. I will move Article 4 as well for discussion at this time.
Seconded.
Okay. Let's jump to Article 4 so we can just get it up in front of people. Here we go. So Article 4 is to see if the school district will raise and appropriate the sum of $1 million to be added to the Building Construction Reserve Fund. So if you can move and second that, that'd be great.
I move the article as presented for discussion.
And I will second it.
Okay, and so back to you, Bryce.
Thanks, Jim. So we talked about this at length on Tuesday, which is essentially before the pandemic, our expectation was that a year from now, in next March, we would come to the town looking to do a renovation or addition at the Bow Elementary School. And we had worked on that project for some period of time over the last year, and we'd expended about $15,000 in design fees. And so we thought to really take that project to the next level, we would have to spend another $150,000 in design fees. And then $1 million we would try to set aside, so it'd be that much less we would have to bond. If we had done that, we would have $2.7 million in a capital reserve fund. And the $150,000 that we were looking for, that wouldn't be impacted by taxes at all. That would come out of that same capital reserve fund. So it wouldn't really matter to the taxpayer in terms of their taxes what amount we had for Article 3. However, once the pandemic came, we've decided to revisit this. And as a result, we were concerned because this would have a significant tax increase, particularly Article 4 with the $1 million. And so we had discussed two different possibilities. We had talked about essentially getting rid of it. And the way we do that for procedural purposes is we say $1, but basically $1 is the same as saying nothing. And so frankly, if this ends up on the ballot, if you mark yes or no, if we decide to go that way, it really makes no difference other than $1. But we decided we wanted to talk more about that. I think as of Tuesday, the school board was really all of the mindset that the $1 million was too much. And we were really looking more closely at nothing or at 400,000. And so we've got a fair amount of feedback as it relates to this issue. And in some respects, I apologize because this is going to take a long time because I'm going to read through all the feedback we got. But I wanted to be fair in that we want to make sure that every person's voice is heard. And so I'm going to start to read the comments, and I have 19 pages of them. So, and they're very, very similar from one to the next. But after we get through those, we'll go back to discussion further. So with that said, Rob Hollinger of Sharon Drive has said, I will propose reducing Articles 3 and 4 to $1. Jack and Susan Eberth of Windchime Drive, they have said, as current residents of Bow, I would adamant implore you to consider amending Articles 3 and 4 to reduce each to $1. With the current uncertainty that we are facing, both from a health and an economic standpoint, I believe that it would be imprudent to commit I believe that it would imprudent to commit to such a large increase in expenditures at this time. While I support Bow as having one of the premier education systems in the state, additional funding at this time does not seem reasonable. I believe that once the economy is back on track and our residents have recovered and are back to work, we should not have difficulty getting these measures to pass by the voters. Charles Douglas, Stone Sled Lane, he says, with 26 million people unemployed and a 12% drop in GDP, we need to cut spending, not increase it, due to the economic uncertainty on a massive scale. One small step is reduce Article 3 and 4 to $1. Deborah Douglas, Stone Sled Lane, please note that I support reducing Article 3 and 4 to $1 each. Dennis and Kim Hazeltine of Allen Road. My name is Dennis Hazeltine, and my wife Kim and I live on Allen Road. We would like to voice our opinion as to the proposed amendments to Article 3 and 4 concerning BES. We support this amendment. David Hall of Page Road opines, my name is David Hall. I live at Page Road in Bow. I support reducing Article 3 and 4 to $1 each. The economic situation is too uncertain to agree with any proposals that would increase taxes. Joan Faust of South Bow Road. I'm in favor of amending Article 3, $150,000 for design at BES, and Article 4, $1 million tax raise for future construction at BES to reduce them each to only $1. Harry Hadaway of Timmins Road. I recommend that amendments be made to the warrant articles 3 and 4 because of the unemployment caused by COVID-19. Article 3, the amount to be raised, reduced from $150,000 to $1. Article 4, the amount to be raised, reduced from $1 million to $1. Valentine Faust III of South Bow Road. I'm in favor of amending Article 3, $150,000 for design at BES, and Article 4, $1 million tax raise for future construction at BES to reduce them each to only $1. Harry Hadaway Jr., Timmins Road. He sent in a second comment. I recommend the following amendments be made because of unemployment as a result of COVID-19. Article 3, the amount to be raised reduced from $150,000 to $1. Article 4, the amount to be raised reduced from $1 million to $1. Shannon Bader and Jess Place of Heidi Lane. We were able to view Tuesday recorded meeting, and we are in favor of option 1. We want to keep the BES project as presented. Despite the virus impact on our community, it is important for that project to progress. Stephanie Dane of South Bow Dunbarton Road. My vote is to pause for a year on the BES addition given the current situation with COVID-19. Michael Habiff of Salt Marsh Circle. I wish to strenuously support the proposed amendments to Article 3 and 4, whereby the amounts posed in said articles are reduced to $1. I find generally that this means of voting is disenfranchising and undemocratic. Donald Lowe of South Bow Dunbarton Road. Please accept this email as my support for reducing Articles 3 and 4 to $1. Barbara Bennett of Tower Hill. Just curious, at the gathering at the library earlier this year, it was mentioned that by the district meeting, you would have data on the projection for the school population for the next several years. I apologize if I missed this on Tuesday night, but I didn't hear mention of it. Wondered if you would share your findings on that Friday evening. Yes, Barbara, I can address that. And looking for my notes on. So many papers here. I can address that. And so we hired a study, the school board did, to get a study of what the population growth is expected in Bow. And that study came back with an enormous increase in population. I wish I had my notes in front of me, but it was, I think it's 300 additional students at Bow Elementary in the next 5 years. And we thought it just didn't seem we didn't think it seemed valid. We thought the results were too big to be able to appreciate. My recollection is that it said ultimately in the school district 1,000 additional students. The school district only has about 1,600 students in it, and so we were concerned that just seemed too big of a study. We had done an internal study as well, looking at different data points that the school could do, and it was substantially less than that. My recollection was, I think it was at the elementary school in the next 5 years, an additional 117 students. I think the expectation was an 18% increase. And that other study, I believe, was a 34% increase. And so we felt like, and again, this all goes to the BES project and whether to have an addition or not. We felt the need to consider going with yet another outside vendor in order to get that right, because that's an important estimate. But if either of those are good indicators, we think that it's pretty likely that the growth is going to continue. Back to my reading. Thomas Fonts of Juniper Lane. My position is we indeed to reduce Article 3 and Article 4 to $1 each. Nicole Habiff of Saltmarsh Circle. I wish to express my ardent support of the proposed amendments to Article 3 and 4, whereby the amounts posed in said articles are reduced to $1. I expect my voice will be heard and counted in this matter. Van Mosher, Allen Road. Please let it be known that we support the amendments to Articles 3 and 4 that reduce each article to $1. Also, please let us know how you're going to facilitate the amendment. And the moderator has already indicated that. William Cook of Page Road. I propose supporting amending Article 3 and 4 to reduce the amounts requested to $1. Now is not the time to impose an additional burden upon Bow taxpayers. These issues can be addressed at a future date. Jackie Peterson of Fiddlehead Circle. I support amending Article 3, $150,000 for design at BES, and Article 4, $1 million tax raise for future construction at BES, to reduce them each to only $1. That would reduce the tax on an average $350,000 home by $274. Ryan Gagne of Old Woodhill Road. Regarding the change to warrant Article 3 and 4, I have the following to offer. While I think it's prudent to consider sending less money to the CIP fund this year to keep the tax rate as low as possible, Article 4, I think it would be better to keep the momentum on the project going and continue to spend up to $150,000 on design engineering fees, Article 3. It was always going to be a rush to get all of the work done over the course of 20 into 21 to be ready for vote in March 21. Why not take the extra time to continue the planning efforts while we have it? It's money that's already set aside and is intended for purposes just as this. The next one's quite lengthy. Donald Lowe, South Bow, Dunbarton Road. Comments for the Bow School Board and the taxpayers of the town of Bow. First, I'd like to commend the school board for making the responsible decision to tap the brakes on additional funding for the proposed BES addition for this year. That being said, I'm still troubled by the apparent singular vision of a $10 million 6-classroom BES addition without serious consideration of the lower cost alternatives previously proposed that would be more in line with the demographic realities of New Hampshire's generally declining public school enrollment. The report by NESDEC indicates that New Hampshire public school enrollment is expected to decrease by 10.3% by 2027. In the same report, they also suggest an increase to the BES enrollment of 57% by 2029. I find these two data points highly contradictory and inconsistent with common sense and trends that can be found by doing a Google search of school enrollment projections for New Hampshire public schools. The data provided by this Google search is consistent with the NESDEC opinion that New Hampshire public school enrollment will decrease over the next decade by around 10%. The key drivers for this are a New Hampshire population with fewer young families. In the early 2000s, the number of young families moving into New Hampshire began to decline significantly. This trend is projected to continue. An increasing number of families are migrating out of New Hampshire for job opportunities. Many New Hampshire high school students attend out-of-state colleges and do not return to New Hampshire to live and work. Lower birth rates. The Center for Disease Control and Prevention, which monitors state-level birth rates, reports that New Hampshire now has the nation's lowest birth rate. Aging population in New Hampshire. New Hampshire is aging at a faster rate than many states. The sources are U.S. Census data, the Carsey Institute at the University of New Hampshire. The suggestion that the BES school enrollment will be atypical of these trends is at best a short-term interpretation of data skewed by the addition of an all-day kindergarten. The argument that the major driver for this increase is an increase in Bow births is also an interpretation of short-term data. As far as I can tell, this is the first time that any SDEC has studied Bow, and on page 7 concede that their margin for error increases when the school district has not done annual enrollment projections. They also suggest a review in October to see if the 2020-2021 enrollment is consistent with their projections. Further, in his memo to the Parent Square dated March 6, 2020, Dr. Cascadden stated that both he and Dwayne Ford had, quote, concerns with the validity of these projections, end quote. In spite of his misgivings about the validity of the projections, Dr. Cascadden goes on to say that we do believe that SAU 67 and especially Bow Elementary School will continue to grow, but offers no other data to support that conclusion. I think we should all be very uncomfortable bonding $10 million with this level of uncertainty. Additionally, the results of the 2020 U.S. Census, when they are available next year, may significantly change these projections one way or the other. With all the uncertainty in the data and enrollment projections, along with local and national economic upheaval due to COVID-19, it doesn't seem prudent to take such a myopic view of what renovations are needed at BES, while dismissing less expensive proposals that will bring the school up to current code and safety requirements. I hope that if the $150,000 warrant article to study the BES edition passes, that the effort would arrive at rational, data-driven conclusions on what the most appropriate solution for BES renovations should be based on input from a variety of sources, including opinions that are not emotionally invested in the 6-classroom addition. I'd like to see the details of the less expensive proposals to draw my own conclusions on what the most prudent action is. While I agree that some renovation is required at BES, I do not believe that the current uncertain enrollment projections support the need for an additional 6 classrooms in the next decade. I also wonder about the future of brick and mortar classrooms coming out of the COVID-19 pandemic. How will the education process change post-COVID-19 with social distancing requirements likely to persist for the foreseeable future and the remote learning technology that has been rapidly developed to get through this crisis? Will homeschooling become more popular as parents try to protect their children from events like these? Lastly, I'd like to comment about the school district meeting process used this year. While I don't have any suggestions on how to have done it differently, we must be cognizant of the simple fact that this year's school meeting excluded a significant portion of taxpayers from participating in the review process that would have been the physical meeting. That portion of the taxpayers is largely made up of the town's elderly, fixed income, and low income folks who may not have computers, may not be technically savvy using them, or may not have received notifications of the online meetings. This means that those same people will not have heard informed arguments for or against this proposal prior to voting on Saturday. How will opposing views be communicated to the taxpayers in the next few days so that they can make an informed decision? This situation has likely skewed the vote in favor of the school addition at any cost due to the majority of participating voters being younger taxpayers with children in the school system. To address Mr. Lowe's comments, I sort of touched on it earlier in that the school isn't married to a 6-classroom addition. We're still looking at the studies of the enrollment moving forward. The 2 studies that we have both indicated a significant amount of increase. And while he's absolutely right in that the state is trending down towards less population, that just certainly hasn't been the case in Bow. Some of the reasons that are thought to be behind that is frankly, it's the good school system. the widening of the I-93, making it easier for Massachusetts folks to commute from as far north as Boston, as Bow, and all the different youth organizations that we have in town compared to many others. Bow has, Cub Scouts and Bow Athletic Club and these sorts of things that many of the other towns of our size do not, and are more equivalent to the Bedfords and those sorts of communities. So we continue to study it, and we will be moving forward as those studies show, but nothing is really set in stone. But all the data we've received so far indicates that Bow is going to continue to grow. However, we're in the middle of a pandemic, and we have no idea, no one does, what the future is going to look like after this in really all aspects of life, one of which is whether people will be continue to move to Bow. Next, from Rana Shigori and Paul Shigori, Stone Sled Lane. We appreciate the hard work of the Bow School Board. We commend the board for its efforts to amend the original warrant articles to reduce the tax burden on the residents. The board appears to have taken a budget that was already lean and further shaved it out of consideration for the taxpayers who are now suffering under the effects of the unforeseen COVID-19 pandemic. We respect the board's intentions to communicate the desire to lower taxes. We're concerned about the safety of the Bow Elementary School. The board has described the many poignant needs of the elementary school, and we know that making the school safer has had to be deferred for the last several years. We're wondering if it is possible to leave Article 3 as originally requested and only amend Article 4. That is to use up to $150,000 for design and planning so that in 2021, a full proposal to proceed can go forward. This gives weight to the urgency to address the current unsafe conditions. We support amending Article 4, Option 1, to reduce the amount to $400,000. We assume the tax impact will be reduced as you have described. Thank you for the opportunity to provide input. Next is from Susan Marcotte Jenkins of Hope Lane. First, I want to compliment you on your out-of-the-box thinking for accommodating the highly unusual circumstances under which the school district must conduct their annual meeting and educate our kids. There are no perfect solutions, but everyone's very hard work is beneficial in many ways, and I appreciate very much your extraordinary efforts to best manage overwhelming challenges. Next, a small suggestion that you make the slides that were used at last night's meeting into another online document that can be viewed without watching the recording. Finally, my input on Articles 3 and 4. I fully agree that the current economic crisis warrants greatly reducing or eliminating the increased tax impact of these articles in their original form. Between the options of reducing or eliminating this funding for the coming year, I prefer the plan that would allow just a little progress in continuing planning for a capital improvement project, i.e. Option 1 from last night's presentation, with a 47-cent decrease in the tax impact. To be honest, I am most concerned about making these options for amendments, very little funding or no funding, subject to a popular vote. The annual meeting's ability to make and amend articles is critical to our fair and democratic process. So I value resisting any temptation to do what is the most convenient by making no amendments and simply having us vote on Saturday the original articles. However, I would encourage you to make clear that if voters do not agree with the amendments made to any of the articles, they can ballot on Saturday, vote not only on the substance of the amendments, but also for or against accepting the meeting's procedures. In summary, I support amending the articles according to the board's option 1. Stefan Lakos of Clearview Drive, I propose an amendment to Article 3 that reduces the sum from $150,000 to $15,000. I propose an amendment to Article 4 that reduces the sum from $1 million to $1. Thank you for your presentation last night and your concern for the high cost of these articles during the pandemic and associated financial hardships that many Bowites are enduring now. Now from Don, Julie, and Jean Eaton of Allen Road. After viewing the presentation on 4/21/20, we, the above voters, support option 2 in place of Article 3 and 4 as presented last night. Due to the COVID-19 and the changing times, high unemployment, and uncertainty of future labor and material cost, we believe putting a hold for this year is the best is in the best interest of Bowtown residents. Note of thanks. You've done a great job getting this information out in the time of social distancing. We thought your presentation during social distancing was well done, and we can see a lot of hard work went into the presentation. Thank you for listening. Judy Klotz of Knox Road. I appreciate your thoughtfulness in thinking of the people in Bow who might be having hard financial times during this pandemic. I believe it is best if Articles 3 and 4 of the March 2020 Bow School District warrant articles are amended to reduce the amount in each to $1. Thank you. We're getting there. We're getting there. Parker Moore of Vaughan Road. Good morning. Pursuant to the discussion regarding 2020 Bow School District warrant articles 3 and 4, I support the reduction and recommendation due to the current economic conditions should change the amounts in articles 3 and 4 to $1 each. This will allow us as a community and individual families to manage the economic stress during the current pandemic and evaluate this request more effectively and realistically in the future when financial recovery and stabilization has occurred. Thank you. Susan Belair of Edgewood Drive. I think that Article 3 and 4 need to be reduced to $1. Many people in town are out of work now, and no one knows how long they will continue to be. Unemployment benefits are a fraction of what people in town make, and is unfair to ask people to have an increase in their taxes for something that can be put off a little bit longer when so many residents' financial futures are in limbo. Also, depending on how long the situation continues, some families may be forced out of town, and there is a possibility that the additions will not be needed and only improvements or a smaller addition. We should wait until we all have a better understanding of how our residents will be affected. I also would like to board to address voting for our elderly residents. We have many residents who do not drive or may not feel safe coming to the drive by voting. What is being done to allow them to vote and be part of this process? I was also very surprised that nothing was mailed out to the residents after this process. Not everyone in town is tech savvy or belong to the Bow Community Facebook page. Again, our older residents are potentially excluded. I know that generally notices are posted, but since all town buildings are closed, as well as the library, that was not an option for notification. I feel that there are far too few residents who are aware of this process. I don't know how many called in, but there are only about 120 on the YouTube live stream, which is an extremely small percentage of residents. I think Jim Hatem already addressed those various questions that she has made. Michelle Lover of Hunter Drive, thank you for offering the virtual school budget meeting for all of us to attend. And looking for input on the articles, I would choose option 1, but support whatever is decided. Thank you. Sarah and Richard Brown of Stony Brook Road. Although we have never attended a school meeting before, we were intrigued with the experimental process, so attended the meeting. We were pleased with the efficiency and the realistic approach to the budget. We both support the amendment to reset the budget to last year's bottom line. Mary Lynn Aurelio of Windsor Road. Many thanks to our hardworking school board members and school district administrators for your thoughtful, insightful, thorough work. I believe all amendments should be adopted with the exception of Articles 3 and 4 as they are currently presented. Due to the sudden economic crisis, we must be mindful of lowering taxes, but not forget the need for BES improvements in the future. I am in favor of option 1 that was suggested by school board members during the annual meeting, keeping $15,000 on design planning fees and depositing $400,000 into a capital reserve fund for a future project would be prudent. At the same time, it is sensitive to our community during difficult economic times by providing an average $165 tax reduction on an average $350,000 home in town. Thank you again for all your hard work and for the town. Thank you all for all your hard work for our town of Bow. Sincerely, Mary Lynn Aurelio. And now everyone also knows my dog, Molly. George Lagos of Windsor Road. First, thank you all for your service to the community, your presentations this evening, and your creativity in meeting the unique challenges of conducting a public meeting under present circumstances. I think that it makes sense to proceed with Article 3, as there is no tax impact. A reduction in the $1 million appropriation is probably prudent, and it demonstrates the school board and budget committee's recognition of the financial considerations related to the coronavirus. I would think the reduced amount of $400,000 makes sense, as whatever is not pre-funded will have to be bonded. My two questions: what is the present intent in terms of the project timetable? Are you hoping to put the bonding request on the 2021 agenda? Question 2, do you have any projections in terms of bonding costs and tax impact? The cost of money is not going to get much lower, but at the same time, there's no reason at this time to anticipate an upturn. Thank you again for your good work. It's always good to see the Budget Committee and School Board working collaboratively. I think we've addressed some of those concerns in terms of the timing of the project. In terms of the bonding, there's no question the bond rates are at an all-time low. By putting this off, it potentially does risk the possibility that those bond rates aren't as low as they are now, but it is what it is. Robert Loof of Wheeler Road. Great job on the presentation. Audio was great and explanations were clear. Just a comment regarding a decision to postpone Articles 3 and 4. As I'm sure you figured out, pushing things out a year still allows time to possibly vote on a bond measure before you need to consider staff contracts again. It also allows ample time for the economy to return to normal prior to having to vote for any bond measure. In short, I support the board's thoughts on possibly postponing those articles. Also from Robert Loof. I think I need a point of clarification. After thinking about it further, I believe my timelines were incorrect. I believe the current BEA and BESS contracts expire at the end of the 21-22 school year, meaning that you start negotiations in the fall of 21 with the hopes of having something before the voters in March of 22. If you push out Article 3 an additional year, then if I understand correctly, your possible bond measure would also fall in March of 22. Certainly positives and negatives of having that happen simultaneously. As we've always said, there's never seems to good year to present the BES project. And what Robert's talking about is the teacher contracts. It's generally and currently is a 3-year contract that the teachers and the support staff are under, and so that would come up for renewal if we postpone this project by a year at the exact same time, and typically that results in in additional funding necessary for the school district. Martin Murray of Tally Ho Lane. In regards to the consideration of amending Articles 3 and 4 of the warrant, I support option 1, as was discussed during the evening virtual meeting. Thank you for all the work you've contributed during this process. Patricia McNeil of Risingwood Drive. In regards to Article 3 and 4, there should be a third option. Reduce Article 3 to $15,000 and Article 4 to $1. Hopefully $15,000 will be sufficient to further delineate the different renovation building options and rough costs. Brian Westover, 63 Robinson Road. Comments only. I'm willing to support the process for the meeting as presented. My preference for Article 3 and 4 is the option 1 reduction. Thank you all for your time, presentation, and creativity to get this meeting done in a timely manner. I'm almost done. Elizabeth Moore of Vaughn Road. Please reduce Article 3 and 4 to $1. Jennifer Johnston of Dow Road. I had a question about the BES expansion. Would this be an opportunity to take advantage of the low interest rates and fund through bonding? I'm an HR person, so this is not an area of expertise. I know the other side is a hit to interest income, but not sure where Bo is with that. And as I already touched on, she's right as well that the bond rates are extremely low at the current time, and shall be for the foreseeable future as far as we know. Teresa Oliveira, Heidi Lane. Thank you for your thoughtful consideration of those who are affected financially by COVID and adjusting the article. I'm in favor of option 1 or 2, but more toward option 2 because we may need more revisements in the structure of the school depending on what happens with changes with COVID, and best to hold until close of the project. Chris Ulrich of Ridgewood Drive. I want to thank Superintendent Cascadden, the SAU staff, and the Bow and Dunbarton school boards for their leadership at this time. This is a district that cares deeply about meeting the needs of all our students. They show that care in the time and energy that takes in keeping the public informed, delivering outstanding education, and showing a deep commitment to our students. I am confident that every person watching this presentation realizes that both schools add tremendous value to our communities. Ensuring that our schools remain amongst the best in the state is critical to maintaining our town's strategic advantage. For these reasons, I will be voting in favor of the warrant articles, especially Articles 3 and 4, allowing us to investigate expanding Bow Elementary School. And Dominic Lucent of Hooksett Road. This is a business address. I am in favor of amending Article 3, $150,000 for design at BES, and Article 4, $1 million tax raise for future construction at BES, and reduce them each to only $1. We have an additional 7 that all essentially said they would like to reduce it to $1. However, they didn't list their address. So as we had indicated earlier, we were only going to read the ones with address and location, but 7 of them just simply say, essentially, we're in favor of amending Articles 3 and 4 and reducing them to $1. And finally, we had one other, again, who didn't list an address. I'll just read it because it's kind of a hybrid. It says, regarding Article 3, it's my understanding that there would be no tax impact if the $150,000 were approved and the town would still move forward with the project. That being said, could Article 2 be amended to include the $150,000 and leave the rest in option 2 alone? So that is every single comment that we received as of like 4 o'clock today, as it relates to Article 3 and Article 4. And in terms of a discussion, as somebody had alluded to earlier, the school board had a public meeting today at 1 o'clock, and we discussed these articles. They were also discussed by the budget committee last night, and we'll have a vote at some point here. But my understanding is that the school board is inclined to reduce both of those to $1. My initial personal take on it was that because there was no tax impact under Article 3 with the design fees, that I was under the, my opinion was essentially that I would keep that at $150,000 or $100,000 because it doesn't make a difference. However, by spending that now, it also is encouraging us going forward with this in March of 21. And having talked to some members of the Bow Elementary School subcommittee, it's my understanding that, well, it is something that we really need done. The roof isn't going to fall in tomorrow. It doesn't absolutely have to be done right this second. And so the fact that we can put this off a year was good enough for me. And so in my view, I'm also now supporting $1 for Article 3 and Article 4. Jen, I see you on the screen. You have any thoughts?
No, I just, I think between Tuesday and those comments, I think the board kind of heard loud and clear from a lot of the comments that people would prefer to go to the $1 on both articles. I think initially, most of us on the board were thinking to keep Article 3 with some money in it so that we could keep the project moving forward. But I also feel confident as the chair of the subcommittee that even without money, we can still keep the subcommittee together and get some work so that we're better prepared when we can move forward with this project.
Eric, do you have any thoughts?
No, just what you've already said. We're I think, all in agreement at this point, in light of the situation we're in and being conscious of that it makes sense to decrease them both to $1 at this point.
Martin, how do you feel?
I agree with your sentiment. Given the current situation and what we've heard from our residents between Tuesday and today, I think the right move would be to amend both articles to go to $1.
And Jenna?
I agree with what everyone else has said to move them both to $1.
And as indicated earlier, the budget committee also agrees. Although Mark Zerba, feel free to chime in if you'd like. Not hearing anything from Mark. I think, Jim, we've finalized our discussion on Articles 3 and 4. Jim, you still there?
Jim's he's muted.
Excuse me, Brian.
Sorry. So Mark is back according to my screen. Mark, did you want to make a comment in relation to 3 and 4?
Thank you. Yeah, I just lost connection there for a minute. So I think many of the points that were read by Bryce were also part of the discussions that the budget committee had. And we ultimately voted 7-2 to recommend that Article 3 be reduced to $1. The only reservations against that were just what had been mentioned, that the money would be coming out of a capital reserve fund, and therefore there would be no tax impact. And with respect to Article 4, we were unanimous in voting 8-0 to recommend that Article 4 be reduced to $1 as well.
Okay.
So by removing those articles, that'll be a tax savings just on those articles alone of $274 on a $350,000 home.
Okay, so thank you. So hearing the discussion pause, I wanted to mention to folks that, you know, one of the reasons we wanted to, or we asked Bryce to read the comments, including the names of our neighbors in Bow, is that, you know, today you're going to hear what the board decides should be on the warrant for tomorrow. So the discussion with the board will end tonight, but you've heard the names of your friends and neighbors, and, you know, you have the opportunity tonight to call them, and, you know, as you would at a meeting, perhaps persuade them about one way or another to vote. I don't think it'll be controversial with respect to these two articles, but in general, you know, you will have that opportunity. We wanted you to hear the names, because even though we can't all gather at the high school, certainly the opportunity to pick up the phone will be available between now and tomorrow, and we would encourage you to use it to make sure that your voice is heard tomorrow at the meeting. So based on the discussion, I've heard that the board would like to move Article 3 to the written ballot with an amendment of the dollar figure to $1. I see that is now presented in that form up on the screen. So do I have a motion, Bryce?
Yes.
And this is a motion on Article 3 to begin with.
Yes, I move that the written ballot ask voters if they are in favor adopting Article 3 as amended.
As amended to what? Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay. Yeah. So it's amended to $1. It's moved and seconded. I'll call the roll. Are you for all those in favor, Mr. Larrabee?
Yes.
Ms. Strongrain?
Yes.
Mr. Osterlock?
Yes.
Dr. Schulman?
Yes.
Ms. Reardon?
Yes.
Okay. So so Article 3 will be moved to the ballot as amended. And Article 4, do I have a motion to move Article 4 to the written ballot with amendment of the dollar amount to $1, which now appears on the slideshow?
Yes, I move that the written ballot ask voters if they are in favor of adoption of Article 4 as amended.
Okay.
Seconded.
Okay. I will now call the roll. Are you in favor, Mr. Larrabee?
Yes.
Mrs. Strongrain?
Yes.
Mr. Osterlaw?
Yes.
Dr. Schulman?
Yes.
And Ms. Reardon?
Yes.
Okay. So we now have,
Jim,
that brings us to Article 5.
can I interrupt you for 1 second? Mark Zerba has one thing he wants to add, if he can have a moment.
Yeah, I apologize. When I said the Budget Committee recommended reducing it to $1, I said the vote was 7-2, and I should have said 6-2. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks.
And is this Article 4, Mark?
That was on Article 3. The withdrawal for design fees.
And what was the vote on Article 4?
The vote on Article 4 was 8-0.
Okay, thank you. Okay. So that brings us back to Article 5 again. And just so to save some steps down the road, Mark, am I right that the Budget Committee did not take any action and has no comment to make regarding Articles 5, 6, and 7?
That is correct, Jim.
Okay. So, in Bryce, can you confirm that we've had no public comments received relating to Articles 5, 6, and 7?
Correct. We have not.
Okay. So it sounds like we're going to move through these pretty quickly, as there is no comments or question or controversy relating to these. So the first item on the agenda is Article 5, which is to raise and appropriate $58,729 to be added to the area school capital improvements, Dunbarton Fees Capital Reserve Fund. Do I have a motion?
Yes, I move the article as presented for discussion.
I second it.
Great, it's been moved and seconded. Bryce, let me see. Are you interested in discussing this at all, or?
I'm not, I guess, other than to indicate that this is on the warrant article every year, and that if we don't agree to this, the money just goes back to Dunbarton.
Thank you. So, any other board members? Thank you. So the motion is to move Article 5 to the written ballot without amendment as presented in the warrant. Having been moved and seconded and no further discussion, let's do this by a voice vote. All those in favor say aye.
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 Right. Nay? Hearing no nays, it's an affirmative vote. So this one will be moved to the ballot. Article 6 is somewhere in this pile. There it is. This is to see if the school district will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $28,000 to be added to the athletic fields facilities capital reserve fund. Do I have a motion?
I move that the article as presented for discussion.
Okay.
Seconded.
Okay, so Bryce, it's on you.
The only discussion I have is that this is essentially the student activity fees for sports, and there's a $50 fee per sport, $100 cap per year, and it all goes into this fund. And almost every year, it's about $28,000.
Okay, assuming I'm seeing no request to talk by board members, so I'll go straight to a vote. So all those, let's see, let's do this by a voice vote. All those in favor of moving it to the ballot without amendment, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. Okay, the ayes have it. It'll be so moved to the written ballot. Article 7. Next slide, please. There we go. Thank you. To see if the school district will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $51,000 for the purchase of athletic equipment, etc. Do I have a motion?
I move the article as presented.
Okay.
Seconded.
Okay. So Bryce?
The only comment I have is that this is no impact to taxpayers. This is just from another capital reserve fund.
Okay. So hearing no other comments by the board members, we'll take the vote on moving this to the written ballot without amendment on Article 7. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. It'll be so moved. And so this is the point in the meeting where I talk a little bit, about the procedures for tomorrow. So I don't know if it came up earlier, but last time we counted, there's been over 400 people 400 views of the YouTube presentation of the first meeting, which was a wonderful number. And at every meeting, there's a lot of questions about logistics and how many ballots to print. So I'm very pleased that the number of folks who've seen that, and we're trying to prepare for the right crowd for tomorrow. We're currently moved to 2 checklists to try to get people checked through the line faster. We're ready to adjust tomorrow as need be. as everybody knows, the procedure will be there will be a written ballot that's now been finalized up on the website, hopefully within an hour. And voters will have an opportunity to print that and bring it with them, and then go through the line at the checklist. I've actually tried to think of ways to make the wait a little more comfortable. And unfortunately, in this COVID-19 world, there's just nobody who can sell coffee or sell or do any other kind of fundraiser while you're waiting in traffic. I'm sorry. But if the polls are open from 9, they open at 9, and we're encouraging everyone whose last name starts with M and a Z to come between 9 and 11, N to Z. Let me say that again. A to M starting at 9, and N to Z, please wait till 11. I will not close the polls if anybody is in line. So if there's a line at 1 o'clock, we will stay there as long as it takes to get anybody who shows up at that point to go through the line and cast their ballot. Please remember to have your IDs ready so that we can make the checklist process as efficient as possible. Please be respectful of people's health and the interest in keeping socially distant. We are setting up the polling stops, if you will, in a way to minimize the number of people together, also to minimize the contact with the written ballot. We ask for your cooperation and your patience, and I think that's all I really have for the procedures, unless any of the board members think there's something I missed.
The only thing I would add, and you said this, but I just want to reiterate that we're just encouraging folks to go with the lettering, A to M, 9 to 11. If you have to go at between 9 and 11, your letter is, and you have a last name Smith, then go between 9 and 11. It's just, we're trying to spread people out.
And also, can we make note that people should, even if they're against the procedure of the meeting, still fill out the ballot in total? That way, if the meeting is still found valid, their vote will still count for the rest of the articles.
So let me clarify that. Everybody's free to fill out the ballot as they so choose.
Correct.
If the procedures fail, every vote fails. So there would be no counting of those votes for sure. That could also inform people as to your opinion about those warrant articles, but they will not count as a matter of the meeting. And the meeting, as we said, will be continued to a date down the road. The most likely date will be just a target date of 2 weeks, just so that we can rethink about what happened and what we want to do. It's always easier to push the meeting date back than it is to bring it forward. So that's why we've been using 2 weeks. So if you feel strongly that we didn't do a good job with these procedures and our whole process, please feel free to vote as you choose. And we will be there tomorrow to do our best to make sure we have a nice day. If nothing else, it'll be warm, thank God, and probably won't snow beforehand. So thank you. If the board has nothing more to say, I'll accept a motion to adjourn this meeting.
Motion to adjourn.
Okay.
Seconded.
All righty. Thank you all.
Thank you all.
Thanks.
Take care.
Guys.
Thanks.